I won $12.5 million in the lottery, and my family turned into a nightmare. After months of harassment over money and bullying, they did something I never thought. Hi, everyone. I don't even know where to begin. I've been lurking on this sub for a while, and I always thought the stories I read were crazy, but nothing could prepare me for what I'm living through now. This might be long, but I really need to get it all out. I, 28 female, come from a big, tight-knit, or so I thought, family. My parents had 4 kids, and I was the second oldest. Money was always an issue growing up. My dad worked construction, and my mom worked part-time at a diner, but with 4 kids, it was never enough. Bills were always overdue, utilities would get cut off, and payday dinners were the only times we didn't eat rice and beans. I moved out as soon as I turned 18. I knew I couldn't live my whole life like that. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school, met my now husband 30 male during my final year of college, and we built a life together. We've been married for 5 years and have a beautiful 3-year-old son. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable and, more importantly, happy. And then, 2 months ago, I bought a lottery ticket on a whim. I don't usually play, but the jackpot was huge, $12.5 million. I figured, why not? When I saw the numbers on the screen match my ticket, I nearly fainted. My husband thought I was joking when I told him it didn't feel real. After taxes, we ended up with about $8.7 million. My husband and I decided to be smart about it. We hired a financial advisor and started making plans, paying off the mortgage, setting up a college fund for our son, donating to charity, and investing. We decided not to go public with the win and only told a few close friends and immediate family members. I thought that was the responsible thing to do. I wish I could go back in time and slap myself. The moment I told my parents and siblings about winning the lottery, it was like flipping a switch. 1 second, they were my family, warm, supportive, and seemingly happy for me, and the next, it was as if they'd been lying in wait for this exact moment. My mom burst into tears, clutching my hands as if she had just been saved from drowning. "This is God's way of finally giving us what we deserve," she said, emphasizing us like we were all entitled to the prize. My dad leaned back in his chair with a smug grin and joked, "Guess it's finally time for me to retire. Maybe get that boat I've always wanted. What do you think, kiddo? You gotta make your old man's dreams come true." My older brother, who hadn't spoken to me much in years, suddenly became nostalgic. "Hey, remember when I let you crash on my couch for 3 months when you were 19? His smile was tight, but his eyes gleamed with expectation. My younger sister, on the other hand, skipped the subtlety entirely. "Oh my God," she squealed, pulling out her phone. "You can totally pay for my wedding now. I'm talking full-on fairy tale designer dress, live band, the works." She rattled off her dream guest list, throwing in comments about what a lifesaver I was going to be. At first, I thought their excitement was harmless. I even felt good about being able to help. I'd always wanted to support my family, and now I had the means to do it. So I sat down and thought carefully about what I could give while still being responsible with my winnings. I gave my parents $100,000 to pay off their debts and live more comfortably. For my siblings, I gifted each of them $50,000. I thought that was incredibly generous. Apparently, it wasn't. At first, the requests came with a thin veneer of politeness. My mom started calling me every day, dropping hints about the dream house she'd always wanted. "It doesn't have to be too fancy," she said, sending me links to listings of sprawling mansions with wraparound porches, swimming pools, and gourmet kitchens. "This one is perfect for me and your father. It's only $850,000, she added, like it was pocket change. My dad was even less subtle. He sent me pictures of luxury trucks, circling his favorites and texting, If I raised you right, you'll know what to do." My sister, meanwhile, was still fixated on her wedding obsessed. Really? When I gently told her that the $50,000 I'd already given her was more than enough to plan a beautiful ceremony, she scoffed, her voice dripping with condescension. "50 grand barely covers the venue I want," she said, flipping through brochures she'd spread across her kitchen table like a war strategist planning a battle. "Do you have any idea how much a live band costs? And I can't just have any dress, I need a designer gown. You only get married once, you know. This isn't the time to be stingy." I tried to reason with her, explaining that a $50,000 budget was more than generous and could easily pay for a stunning wedding. But she just rolled her eyes and waved me off. "You've got millions, and you're telling me you can't make my dream wedding happen? That's insane. You're acting like this is a big ask when, in reality, it's pocket change for you. What's even the point of being rich if you're not going to use it to help your family?" Her entitlement was staggering, and every conversation with her about the money left me feeling drained and, frankly, infuriated. She didn't stop there. Every day brought a new demand. She started sending me long, detailed texts outlining her vision: a luxury venue with a picturesque garden, 5-star catering, a fireworks display to close the night, and a honeymoon to the Maldives. Oh, and don't forget the bridesmaids' dresses. They'll need to be custom made so everything matches perfectly, she texted me one evening. I'm thinking Vera Wang or Marquesa, it's only right to do this the classy way. If I didn't reply fast enough, she'd bombard me with follow-up messages. Are you ignoring me? This is your chance to show how much you care. You're supposed to be my big sister. Don't you want to see me happy on the most important day of my life? It was exhausting. My brother, on the other hand, had burned through his $50,000 in what seemed like record time. I later found out he'd spent most of it on expensive gadgets, nights out with friends, and an impulsive purchase of a second-hand sports car that broke down within weeks. When the money ran out, he didn't even try to hide his desperation. He called me late one night, launching straight into a pitch for a business idea he claimed would change both of our lives. "All I need is $300,000 to get this off the ground," he said, his voice full of urgency, as though he'd already made plans to cash the imaginary check I hadn't even agreed to. He rambled on about opening a bar in a trendy part of town, promising it would be a goldmine and that I'd see a huge return on my investment within the first year. When I hesitated and told him I wasn't comfortable giving out more money, his tone shifted immediately. The charm evaporated, replaced by irritation. "It's not a handout, it's an investment," he snapped, as if trying to guilt me into compliance. "Don't you want to help your family build something for the future? Or are you just planning to sit on all that cash and let it rot in some bank account?" When I still said no, he became even more defensive, accusing me of not trusting him and being selfish. "This is exactly why people say money changes everything," he said bitterly. "You've let it go to your head. You're acting like you're better than us now. All I'm asking for is a chance to prove myself, and you can't even do that. What's wrong with you?" His words stung, even though I knew deep down that he was projecting his own frustrations onto me. But the manipulation was relentless, and no matter how firm I tried to be, the guilt-tripping never seemed to stop. When I kept refusing their escalating demands, the mood shifted. The guilt-tripping began excessive. "You're so selfish," my mom told me during one heated phone call. "After everything we sacrificed for you, this is how you repay us. We could have had a better life if we hadn't been so focused on raising you and your siblings. You're letting the money change you," my dad said bitterly. "We didn't raise you to be this ungrateful." My sister was the most dramatic of all. She went on a full-blown tirade, crying about how she'd always struggled while I was now hoarding money I didn't even earn. And my brother, he was cruel. "You think you're better than us now," he said one day. "You didn't work for that money. You don't deserve it any more than we do." One evening, as my husband and I were putting our son to bed, we heard loud banging on the front door. My heart sank when my husband opened the door just a crack. We saw my brother standing there, his face red with fury. "Stop hiding from the family," he shouted. "You think you can ignore us? Face the consequences of your greed." My husband tried to reason with him, but my brother shoved the door open and stormed inside. He got in my husband's face, calling him a gold-digging leech and accusing him of manipulating me into keeping the money for ourselves. "You don't deserve any of it," he yelled. "That's all your family's money. You just married into it." When my husband calmly asked him to leave, my brother sneered. "You're lucky I don't make you leave permanently." At that point, I called the police. My brother stormed out before they arrived, but the damage was done. I felt violated and terrified in my own home. After that, my entire family turned against me. My mom accused me of tearing the family apart by calling the cops. My sister said I was asking for trouble by being so selfish. The text messages and voicemails started flooding in, some guilt-tripping, others outright threatening. "You'll come around, or we'll make you," my dad texted one night. "You're ruining my life," my sister wrote. My brother went even further. He texted my husband directly, "You'd better watch your back. This isn't over." We blocked their numbers and social media accounts, but the harassment didn't stop. Nasty handwritten letters started arriving in the mail, accusing me of betraying my family. One from my mom ended with, "You'll regret this, mark my words." I didn't recognize my family anymore. These were the people who had celebrated my successes, supported me through tough times, and always had my back. Now, they felt like strangers, dangerous strangers who would stop at nothing to get what they wanted. I felt trapped in a nightmare, constantly looking over my shoulder. Every knock at the door, every unfamiliar car parked on our street sent me into a panic. My husband and I started sleeping with the doors locked and a security camera monitoring the front porch. The money I'd once been so excited about had turned into a curse. It had taken my family away from me, leaving behind greed, resentment, and threats. But even then, I didn't know just how far they'd go. Update: I thought things had finally calmed down. I couldn't have been more wrong. After months of constant harassment, manipulation, and threats, my family had gone quiet. At first, the silence was deafening. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, my nerves coiled tightly, anticipating some new scheme or confrontation. But nothing came. No calls, no emails, no surprise visits at our doorstep. It was as if they'd vanished, taking their relentless demands and guilt-tripping with them. It felt like a fragile truce had finally been reached, though I didn't trust it. I convinced myself they had finally let go of their obsession with the lottery money. Perhaps they had realized I wasn't going to cave to their demands, that the door to endless handouts had been firmly shut. Maybe they had moved on to something or someone else. For the first time in what felt like forever, I started to believe life could be normal again. My husband and I turned our focus to our son, who was still blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had engulfed our lives. We enrolled him in preschool, where he quickly made friends and fell in love with finger painting and story time. His laughter became a balm for my frazzled nerves. We began planning a small family vacation, something simple, a weekend getaway to the beach. We even started toying with the idea of buying a new house somewhere farther away, where we could leave the weight of the past behind and truly start fresh. But even as I tried to lean into this new normal, unease lingered like a shadow I couldn't shake. Little things began to happen, small, almost imperceptible at first, but unsettling nonetheless. One afternoon, as I was unloading groceries, I noticed a car parked down the street. Its windows were tinted so darkly that I couldn't see inside. At first, I thought nothing of it, but hours passed, and the car didn't move. I glanced out the window multiple times, my pulse quickening with each glance. It felt like someone was watching us, though I couldn't prove it. When I mentioned it to my husband, he shrugged it off. "It's probably just someone waiting for a friend or lost," he said, brushing my concern aside with a casual wave of his hand. But my gut told me otherwise. A few days later, there was a package left on our porch. It was a plain brown box with no return address. Inside, there was nothing but crumpled newspaper, no note, no explanation, just an empty, meaningless package. Harmless, maybe, but something about it sent a chill down my spine. It felt deliberate, like a message I couldn't decode. Then came the conversation with our neighbor. She stopped me one morning as I was getting the mail, her expression curious but concerned. "Hey, just a heads up," she said. "Someone was asking about you the other day. They said they were an old friend of yours, but they wouldn't leave a name. I thought it was strange." I froze, clutching the stack of envelopes in my hand. What did they look like? I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. She frowned, thinking. I didn't get a good look. They stayed in their car most of the time. "Just some middle-aged guy, I guess. They asked if you still lived here and if you'd be around later." I told them I wasn't sure. I figured it was nothing, but now I'm not so sure. My stomach churned. It wasn't just strange, it was calculated. My instincts screamed that someone was trying to gather information, to get closer, but I tried to push the thought away. I wanted to believe it was all in my head, that I was letting my anxiety over the past few months spiral into paranoia. I wanted to believe we were finally safe, but deep down, I knew better. The quiet wasn't peace, it was a storm building on the horizon. And then the first crack appeared. One night, long after my husband and son had gone to bed, I heard the faintest sound outside, a shuffle, like footsteps on gravel. I crept to the window, heart pounding, and peered out. There was nothing there, just the dim glow of the street lamp and the silhouette of our car in the driveway. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, standing in the dark, watching. The next morning, I found something strange on the porch. A single cigarette, but still faintly smelling of smoke, as if it had been extinguished just moments before. We didn't smoke, and neither did any of our neighbors. It felt like another message, one I couldn't ignore. I started double-checking the locks, drawing the curtains tightly shut, and sleeping with my phone within arm's reach. My husband tried to reassure me, but even he couldn't hide the worrying that began to creep into his voice. The quiet wasn't a truce. It was a warning. Something was coming. I just didn't know what. And then it happened. It was an ordinary morning. My husband and I were up early, making breakfast, while our 3-year-old son slept in his room. Or so we thought. My husband went to check on him, and when he didn't come back right away, I knew something was wrong. I walked into our son's bedroom and saw my husband standing in the doorway, pale as a ghost. "He's not here," he said, his voice trembling. At first, I thought he meant our son had wandered into the living room or was playing hide and seek. But then I noticed the open window. The curtains were swaying gently in the morning breeze, and my son's bed was empty. His favorite blanket, the one he never went anywhere without, was gone. I screamed his name, running through the house like a madwoman. I looked under beds, behind doors, in closets, anywhere a 3-year-old could hide. But he wasn't there. That's when we saw the note. It was taped to our front door, written in blocky, uneven handwriting that was all too familiar. My dad's handwriting. "If you want to see him again, you'll give us what we're owed." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My legs gave out, and I collapsed on the floor, clutching the note in my hands. My husband grabbed it and read it, his face darkening with rage. "This is insane," he said, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the police." I couldn't even respond. I was in shock, my mind racing with every horrible possibility. Was our son scared? Was he hurt? Would we ever see him again? The next hours were the longest of my life. The police worked quickly, combing through evidence and questioning neighbors. They pulled security footage from the street and found grainy footage of a van parked outside our house in the early hours of the morning. The license plate was partially visible, and they traced it back to, of course, my parents. When the police raided my parents' house, the scene was surreal, something out of a nightmare. My son was sitting on the couch, clutching his stuffed animal, his face streaked with tears. His little hands trembled as he reached for me the moment I stepped into the room. Seeing him there, so small and frightened, shattered something deep inside me. But my parents, they acted as if nothing was wrong. My mom stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, her expression more annoyed than concerned. My dad sat in his recliner, sipping coffee like it was just another Sunday morning. My brother, slouched in a chair, barely looked up from his phone, only muttering, "This is such a waste of time." As the police tried to take control of the situation, my mom was quick to speak, her tone dripping with condescension. "We were just watching him," she said, like she was doing us some grand favor. "They're terrible parents, and we wanted to make sure he was safe. You don't need to make this into such a big deal." I couldn't hold back any longer. My voice cracked with fury as I screamed, "You kidnapped my child. Do you have any idea what you've done to us?" To him, my dad didn't even flinch. He leaned back in his chair, smirking like this was all some minor inconvenience. "We didn't hurt him," he said casually, as if that excused everything. "You're overreacting. Maybe if you'd listened to us in the first place, this wouldn't have been necessary." Necessary, my voice broke as tears streamed down my face. "You think traumatizing a 3-year-old is necessary? You've crossed every line imaginable." Then my mom chimed in, her words twisting the knife even deeper. "We were trying to teach you a lesson," she said coldly. "Family comes first. Maybe now you'll stop acting like a selfish little girl and do the right thing." The police weren't buying any of it. The lead officer ordered them to stand up, but my dad refused, glaring at him. "I'm not going anywhere. You people don't know what you're talking about. She's my daughter, and that's my grandson. This is a family matter." When the officers moved closer, my dad finally stood, but made a show of puffing out his chest, trying to intimidate them. My mom began wailing theatrically, shouting, "We're being arrested for protecting our grandson. This is ridiculous. She's tearing this family apart." She clung to the doorframe as they tried to escort her out, screaming, "You're going to regret this. You've destroyed your family." Even my brother, who had barely reacted to any of it, decided to pitch in. "This is so stupid," he muttered, rolling his eyes. "You're just going to let the cops take you for this, over nothing." But when the officers turned to him, he immediately backed down, muttering under his breath while sinking deeper into the chair. As they were finally led out in handcuffs, my mom kept yelling over her shoulder, "You'll regret this, mark my words. You're no daughter of mine." I stood frozen in the doorway, clutching my son, who buried his face in my neck, sobbing softly, and my husband holding tight us both. I thought I'd prepared myself for the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for the sheer audacity and coldness of their actions, or for the realization that they still didn't think they'd done anything wrong. Since then, our lives have been a whirlwind of chaos and fear. We've moved to an undisclosed location. My husband and I decided it was too dangerous to stay in our old house, especially knowing how far my family was willing to go. We've hired private security, installed state-of-the-art surveillance systems, and are working with a lawyer to get restraining orders against not just my parents, but my siblings as well. They didn't physically take my son, but they knew about it. They were complicit. My son is physically safe, but the emotional damage is already showing. He wakes up in the middle of the night, crying and asking why Grandma and Grandpa took him away. He's scared to be left alone, even for a second. I don't know how to explain to him that the people who are supposed to love him the most did something so cruel. As for me, I feel like I've lost everything. My family, my peace of mind, my sense of security. These were the people who raised me, who I trusted with my life, and they betrayed me in the worst possible way. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust anyone again. Every time I see a car I don't recognize or hear a knock at the door, my heart races. I keep replaying everything in my head, wondering how it came to this, how I didn't see the warning signs earlier. To anyone reading this, please, please take my story as a warning. Family doesn't always mean love and loyalty. Sometimes it's the people closest to you who are capable of the most devastating betrayals.